Hey everybody, welcome in. This is College Basketball Today here at SportsGrid, joined by none other than the coach, James Young. I am Adam Kaufman. We got you for the next hour looking through everything happening across college basketball. And as you know, it is the final Saturday of the season with Selection Sunday upon us, and then the real fun begins. But I don't want to dismiss the enjoyment we're getting out of conference tournaments, which of course continue on into today. As Coach joins me here, Coach, I want to start just by looking back at yesterday a little bit. I know there were a lot of games, but none bigger in terms of the ultimate outcome than looking in the quarterfinals in the Big Ten, where we saw Wisconsin not only cover as an 8.5-point dog, but win outright in overtime against Illinois to set up a very difficult challenge today in the semis against Michigan. What'd you take away from the Badgers' win?
Well, listen, it's when you get to this point, Adam, there is a lot of excitement in regards to fan bases, but for the coaches and the players, it's a lot of stress because you really have to throw out what you've done the previous 3 or 4 months. It is about what you're doing now. Can you get on a run? Some teams like Illinois had looked really good earlier in the year. You were talking about Illinois at one point being a 2 seed. Now all of a sudden they lose and get picked off in the quarterfinals. How they slide. Wisconsin moves upboard. So to me, you know, it's one of those things where as a coach, you kind of look at your kids and say this, 40 minutes. 40 minutes. We just got to be better than them for 40 minutes. Greg Gard's team did that yesterday. And this is also the thing. When you're a team that's not expected to win a conference tournament, when you get into that next round, honestly, AK, you play more relaxed because it's not so much you're not supposed to be here, but the pressure's on the team in the other locker room. So when you go against, obviously Michigan today, there's no pressure on their team, just like there's no pressure on Mick Cronin's team. You got to play loose. But what that means is for that team that's the favorite, the big favorite, the one's laying the 8, 9 double-digit points, when the game is close early, the longer it goes, AK, you start to tense up. Maybe you make a little bit of mistakes you don't make, and then that allows that team that's not supposed to be there can not only continue to be there, but maybe even steal another game.
Well, to that point, Coach, I know it's not like the kids or the coaching staff in that Michigan locker room give a damn about covering a 12.5-point spread today. They just want to win and advance to the Big Ten tournament final and continue to position themselves not only for a 1 seed, which I would say is in the bag, but the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. But still, when we look at today's game, I guess I'm curious about 2 things. One, how important ultimately is it for the Wolverines in terms of their overall seeding? But beyond that, how do we look at Wisconsin as a live dog off of what the Badgers did yesterday? Because Michigan, it's not exactly like the Wolverines blew doors yesterday against Ohio State. That was a survival. And now you got a 12.5-point spread. We kind of talked about this yesterday on Newswire when you joined me. Duke with a narrow victory a couple of days ago, setting themselves up for, okay, are they ripe for the picking, or are they going to blast? Are they going to cover today going away, which is exactly ultimately what they did. It was kind of a wake-up call. Is yesterday a wake-up call for Michigan now against Wisconsin today?
Yeah, I think what you look at when you look at that game, you probably, with that big spread, you're going to look at the first half minus a point if you're Michigan and figure that if you're Dusty May, you jump out and you race out, kind of the way Duke did yesterday, right? Because you don't want to leave any doubt in your mind whether you're the better team. And I think that's the thing where when you have to look at it is, and I've, from experience from seeing this, is when you are the underdog, you want to survive. If you're the favorite, you got to punch the underdog early. Kind of way like UConn did last night to Georgetown, or the night before that to Xavier. You want to punch early, get yourself out to a early lead, which calms your guys down. So I'm always curious to see about those teams that are heavily favored coming off a poor performance the night before on how they bounce back. I think Dusty May's crew does. Best way to play, to my eyes, is just to take Michigan minus the points in the first half and figure Dusty May riles up the troops and they race off to a big lead early on.
if there's anything that gets people fired up, tweeting things like "This is March" and all of those hashtags, Coach, it's when you get a 15 over a 2. And I realize we're not yet into the field of 68. We're still talking about conference tournaments, but Ole Miss yesterday, sinking a parlay for me, I'll just mix that in, upsetting Alabama 80-79, covering and winning as a 12.5-point dog. What does this mean for Ole Miss going forward? A team that's not even 500 is sitting a few games below 500 on the season overall, but we know full well when a team gets hot for 1 week, this stretch of the season, it can change everything.
Yeah, 40 more minutes. I mean, I wrote an article a couple of days ago about the bid steal. This is the bid steal. This is a team at Ole Miss that was predicted not to be very good, had a rough year, but let's be honest. Chris Beard, regardless of his transgressions off the floor, on the floor, is a hell of a coach. And he gets his team to buy in and play hard. And what they did last night to Alabama, a team that can get to 90 or 100 points, is they put them in jail. So what is the recipe for today? A team with Darius Cuff, with Trevon Brazile. Ready? Rinse, repeat. Can you do it again? And if they do it again, then all of a sudden you're going to get to Sunday, right, in the finals, AK, if they can pull off another upset, and I'll never count out a Chris Beard team, is a bunch of teams that are in the bottom of every bracket in regards to last four in are going to start to sweat. Because then if they get in, which they had no business getting in the tournament on an at-large bid, that will change the minds of worth someone else. So the ramifications of what Ole Miss can continue to do if they keep winning is not just their play, but themselves getting in, but who then gets left out of the tournament if they were to continue this miraculous one. Kind of like what NC State did a couple of years ago with DJ Burns or what Patrick Ewing did in 2021 with Georgetown, where neither team had no business winning their conference championship.
We'll look at that matchup with Arkansas coming up in a little bit, and of course preview some of the games that are happening throughout the day today, some that begin at the top of the next hour. So we got action coming up for you real fast. But in terms of winning the SEC, I'm looking at the odds here, and Florida minus 210, followed by Arkansas plus 270. Then it's Vandy at plus 550, and then you get to those Rebels, Ole Miss at 27-1. I mean, that's still an incredible number in terms of value. Do you see any value that's, I don't know, maybe worth a sprinkle just to, I don't know, be entertained a little bit along the way? Or is this just that uphill a battle as the odds would indicate to where you're burning cash?
You're burning cash, AK, because the way Florida's playing, they are mean, they are big, they are nasty, and they will get every rebound. I mean, AK, they got three guys they start 6'10" or bigger, and they bring a 7'2" guy off the bench. I mean, how do you defend that in a half court? And the way that I feel like Chinaloo's been like a great story this year, but Alex Condon is starting to be what we thought he was going to be the beginning of the year. So with Thomas Howe in the back and the front court, and Xavier Lee starting to figure it out, and Boogie Flynn playing really good basketball, and the guys off the bench, Todd Golden's team, although he wasn't happy he didn't win by enough versus Kentucky, which low-key as a coach, I love that you would say that in an interview post-game. This team is dangerous. So the better way to play this is, I think Florida's going to win the SEC. So maybe take them and Duke to win the ACC, put it into a parlay, and find yourself near even money. That would be the way that I would play teams that are heavily favored to win their conference tournament to kind of bring the odds back. Try and find a dance partner. To me, that dance partner with Florida could be Duke.
We can expand upon this a little bit later on because it's not a 30-second conversation, but Houston taking care of business against Kansas relatively easily last night keeps Houston at 5th on the odds board to win the national championship at 12-1, Kansas sitting at 50-1. But man, we previewed this game yesterday, and we were both very much on the Houston side. Despite some habits of playing with their food, they went out and just took care of business against a Kansas team that continues to just look inferior despite its talent.
Yeah, they just are not looking right, but Houston did look right. And it sets up a really interesting match with Arizona later today. But for Kansas to talk maybe, could this be the end of the time of Bill Self?
We can get into all of that as we continue on. Of course, full previews of today's slate. Lots of fun games in front of us that we are looking forward to here on College Baseball. basketball today. Go nowhere. You are watching Sports Grid. Back in college basketball today here on Sports Grid with the coach James Young, Adam Kaufman. Coach, we got a bunch of games coming up throughout the day today, obviously. So let's start to jump in, especially since some begin at the top of the hour here over in the Ivy League tournament. We have Cornell and Yale. Yale is a 4.5-point favorite, big total in this one at 162.5. Of course, Yale has been excellent throughout the year, 23-5, only 3 losses in conference, 11-3 in the Ivy. Should the Bulldogs go out and roll, just continue to do what they're doing?
Yeah, they should. Yale's had a hell of a year, and shout out to Coach Jones, someone I've known, and his twin brother I've known for a long, long time. This Yale team is continuing to play really good basketball, and this has not been like a year. This has been several years. If you think about the kind of the way the Ivy League has gone for a long time, it was Princeton, right? Then you had that run with Penn. Then when Steve Donahue was at Cornell, he had a little bit of a run. So it's kind of bounced around. Now it's kind of been at Yale, a Yale program that continues to produce guys, high level players. Obviously, I think about Danny Wolf, what he did before he transferred over to Michigan a couple of years ago. So I will go ahead and lay the points with the Yale Bulldogs today, minus a 4.5. I think they get the job done.
We also, at the top of the hour, over in the America East playoffs, the final here between Vermont and UMBC. Comparable teams, much lower total, by the way, at 136.5. UMBC minus 3.5. I'm seeing some people in the industry on the dog, just seeing some value there. Again, if you look at KenPom statistics, offense, defense, these teams, as I said, very, very similar. UMBC has been stronger in conference, just a little bit, 14-2 versus 12-4 on the Vermont side. Do you go with the home team here playing in Baltimore?
Well, usually we look at that home team, but I do like Vermont. Vermont has had a hell of a run themselves. Going I believe second place in the league. So to me, this is a pretty even matchup. You look at a Vermont team; they got a kid Gus Yalden, who's a guy that's kind of bounced around, was a top 100 recruit. I forget where he ended up. Then he went to Seton Hall, and now he's at Vermont. He's kind of been this kind of lightning rod. It's a kind of a fun guy to watch. Kind of has a little bit of a long-haired Bill Laimbeer in regards to like. You love him when he's on your team, getting the crowd into it, very charismatic. But if he's the crowd of UMBC, they'll be yelling, they'll be screaming at Gus. But I don't think Gus cares. He kind of likes that villain role. So look for Vermont plus the points. Wouldn't be surprised if they steal it in the American East final.
So Michigan here coming up at 1 o'clock, and not to worry, we won't go game by game by game all the way throughout. We'll mix in some other things. This is a great opportunity with this game to do so. Some bigger picture thoughts between Michigan and Wisconsin, and we started a little bit earlier in terms of what's at stake for Michigan, but you look through at what is obviously a 30-2 team. It's two losses. Duke, sure, one of the top teams in the country, one of the favorites to win the national championship. But the very first one, coach, came all the way back in January 10th, against this Wisconsin team. It was 91-88. So clearly, the Badgers have an affinity for hanging around, which makes you ask, I guess, a couple of different questions. One, do the Badgers do the same thing when you're looking at another gigantic spread? Just kind of keep it interesting, even if Michigan does win this game versus the dog winning outright. Or is this that bounce back from Michigan, not only in the head to head, but off of, again, what we saw yesterday in a narrow survival of Ohio State?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, AK, because of the fact of the narrow win and the fact that Michigan wasn't impressive, I think that's when you're going to get you have Dusty Maynard. Listen, literally as a coach, guys, has two ways he can walk into the locker room. Number one, he walks in the locker room and says, "This team picked you off in your own building earlier in the year, so they can beat you." You also have come off of a performance against a rival where you did not play well, where you almost get picked off. So to me, that is where you drum up um, intensity from your team. A Michigan team that's been really good this entire season. And you're right, AK. Listen, if Duke somehow slips up, I think there's going to be interesting conversations because obviously there is the fact of what Michigan is doing the entire year, but Florida's eye test is going to make it very compelling how far they move up that 1 seed line if they win the SEC. If Houston can pick off Arizona, which I think is very, very possible, and then what happens with Duke. So to me, it's everybody kind of locks into these 1 seeds. They're still positioning because of the snake. And then to get into it a little bit deeper with the Big Ten is you also don't want to try and have teams match up with each other in the same league in the finals in regards to your conference play. So now, what do we do about Michigan State that lost? What do we do about Illinois that lost? There's teams that are jockeying all over the place, Adam, not just for that one line, but even that 2 and 3 seed line. Very interesting what's going to happen today. But for Michigan, I think they come out with a lot of intensity. That's why I love them in the first half.
Michigan minus 220 to win the Big Ten, followed by Purdue at plus 260. Then you start to get into the longer odds. Wisconsin 12-1, UCLA at 17-1. Does Michigan need the win today, not to get a 1 seed, but the 1 seed, the number one overall seed in the field of 68?
I think the head-to-head with Duke's going to cost them the overall 1 seed, in my opinion. So I think Duke will probably win that out, even though the quad record, obviously, for Michigan is outstanding, and their play has been outstanding for the entire year. So I think that's something that's of note is that head-to-head matchup. And Adam, it's amazing. We can go into the NCAA tournament and think that they're going to look at quads, they look at net. When they look at net, they look at strength of schedule. They look at strength of schedule, they look at how you're playing. They look at how you're playing, they look at who's hurt. So to me, it's a crapshoot of where they go. But for me personally, over the totality of the year, because of the head-to-head matchup at a neutral site, Duke to me is that number 1 seed, followed by Michigan. And then it gets kind of dicey because, like I said before, the way Florida's playing, they can move themselves up with a dominating performance in the SEC tournament.
Let's pull up the national championship odds again real quick, just so everybody can see what we're dealing with here. Again, Michigan is at the top of the board at 3-1, Duke at plus 350, Arizona 5-1, Florida 6-1. Then you have Houston 12-1. Then everything goes 20-1 and beyond, obviously. I feel like every insider across college hoops that we've had on the network here recently, at least the ones, coach, that I've spoken with, have said, yeah, I think as boring as it is, it's one of those that ultimately cuts down the nets. You look back at last year and all the chalk that ultimately got there, and it's a little bit, again, sort of blah for this time of year. People want chaos and Cinderella stories, but does it feel like to you ultimately it's one of the powerhouses to win?
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could see some sneaky at Iowa State with T.J. Ossenberger, but to me, it's one of those top teams you're looking at winning it all.
We can let Coach continue those thoughts when we come on back, see if there is any value down the board. I've been banging the drum on Hurley and UConn. When you can get that team, obviously, sitting here at 20-1, it's hard to ignore. We will return on College Basketball Today.
Everybody has to develop. You know that. Think about Joe Burrow, okay? The beginning of his senior year, he was projected a 6th round draft pick, okay? And that's after playing a year at LSU. So Arch still has some developing to do, but he does have the potential to be a great player.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio. Only on SportsGrid.
This is not a probability market. This is an information narrative market, which, by the way, there are already people who know the answer to this question. So yes. You are not, you're not battling getting the right price. This is not math. This is who the hell knows where Taylor Swift might get. Yeah. You know who knows? Taylor Swift's people.
Prediction Markets Edge. Only on SportsGrid.
I love these tournaments. I love the Olympics. I love NFL drafts. I love, events. I love, the UFL, arena football.
Yeah.
Dude, the sports books don't have algorithm computers for this, Kevin. They don't freaking know. How the hell is the sports book supposed to set a number for this? They didn't. Yeah. Dude, the FanDuel had USA at -5.5.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
I really wish I could pull out my crystal ball and predict accurately the future and, put money on it and see if I could win. But I think the answer of where we're heading is more uncertainty, and in the short term, more companies, like you mentioned, trying to capitalize on that. When prediction markets first kind of took off this past year, there was a little bit of a hesitancy from sports books.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid.
Back with Coach. We're talking about today's slate in front of us and, of course, bigger picture odds when it comes to the national championship in college basketball. Selection Sunday upon us. Much to still be determined across games today and tomorrow. It should be another full slate and a fun one to keep an eye on. We will preview as many games as we have time to get to here in this hour. But, Coach, just before the break, we were talking about national championship odds and whether or not it will be the chalk, ultimately, the one seeds representing in the Final Four again. One of these better teams, Michigan, Duke, Arizona, Florida, even Houston, that ultimately cuts down the net. You mentioned Iowa State. It's not exactly a dumpster dive when it comes to the odds, but you are getting some value at 25-1 compared to some of those teams that are in single digits, clearly. I mentioned UConn, similar story, 20-1, narrowly in front there of Iowa State. I just wonder, how far down the board could you be comfortable going, or do you have to wait and see what the brackets look like and what the paths to that national championship appear to be?
I think I'm a big believer, Adam, you know this, of styles make fights, right? So to me, seeing where teams are slotted is when I'm going to kind of dive in. The problem is that some of the markets are going to move. If UConn goes and beats St. John's, think about this, folks. St. John's is 24-2 at MSG over the last 2 years. They go in there and they beat St. John's. St. John's team, they beat by about 40 points a couple of weeks ago up in Connecticut. They're not going to be 20-1 anymore. Right? So to me, yeah, if you got a team that you're like, they're going to win it, then you go put your ticket in now because it's going to move based on what happens the next 2 days and Selection Sunday. But if there is a team that I'm looking at, and people are going to be shocked because they know I'm not a big fan of this coach, guard play wins. And Purdue's got the best point guard in the country in Braden Smith. And the game slows down. So their tempo, which is in the bottom 150, plays better in the NCAA tournament than it does in the regular season. So when you have that backcourt of Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, two experienced guys that know where each other are going to be on the floor, and then you obviously add a Kaufman Wren, who is a legitimate 20-10 guy at any time, that's a team, if they don't go against, let's say they're on the other side of a bracket of Florida, right? A team that they can't deal with bigs, right? If there's a team that matches up with them size-wise, 40-1. Remember, folks, if I'm not mistaken, I think Purdue was preseason number 1 or number 2. So to me, if they get Adam the right draw, they could be a team that can go on a run. But like I said, they're 40-1 now. They win 2 more games in the Big Ten tournament, and they move up to let's say from a 3 line to a 2 line, which is possible. That 40-1 now goes to 20-1 or lower. So if you got a team, take it now. But me, style make fights. I need to see the matchups come Selection Sunday.
I know you like Florida, so do I. This team is an 8.5-point favorite today in its game, 1 o'clock Eastern against Vanderbilt in the SEC Tourney semifinal. But, Coach, what I can't ignore is this game is happening in Nashville, Tennessee. Do we need to look seriously at Vanderbilt just to cover, if nothing less, and keep this game close?
I don't know how they keep those bigs off the glass. I think that is the thing that they, for a long time, I used to say to my kids, I want to go play volleyball. My kids were like, what do you mean, coach, play volleyball? Meaning, throw the ball at the basket and go get it. Sometimes your best offense is the O board because of the putback, because of the fact that you put teams into foul trouble, because teams that have strong guard play, you negate the fast break, and you just lean on teams. What Vandy's done has been fantastic. I personally think this is a bad matchup for Vandy. I know the crowd will be into it, but nothing takes away your home court advantage being the game in Nashville than the ball going off the glass and you can't secure it. And no one is better on the offensive glass than the Florida Gators.
Over in the MEAC, we got the final here. Howard against North Carolina Central, also 1 o'clock Eastern. Now, I realize everybody wants to talk about Wisconsin and Michigan and Florida and Vanderbilt and some of these better teams playing today, obviously. But hey, when you get to a conference tournament final, deserves respect. And Howard has just been trouncing teams, covering, with relative ease, despite double-digit spreads here, Coach. And again, we're getting that today. 12.5 in this matchup against NC Central. Howard clearly superior, 22-10. Do they continue just finish strong and punch their ticket?
Yeah, they should finish up strong and do that. But obviously, it's tough when the game with that big of a spread. So you could get a team in North Carolina Central that could be really close early. Let that line drop and then jump on Howard late. They'll open the game up in the second half, even if the game is close.
There you go. Maybe some in-game betting. Take that number down below into single digits. Maybe you can get a 6.5, 7.5. And if you can get NC Central to hang around early and not allow Howard to just blow doors right out of the gate, we'll see. Much more coming up here as we're about halfway home on college basketball today here on the Tap. All right, back with Coach James Young, Adam Kaufman, halfway home college basketball today here on SportsGrid. Plenty more games to get to throughout the day. Conference tournaments roll on, and of course, setting you up for Selection Sunday tomorrow. But Coach, before we get back to previewing some of these games and looking at obviously some of the odds to win conference tournaments and semifinals and final stages, depending on which tournament we're looking at. And of course, plenty of teams have already punched their tickets as well, which they are just sitting waiting to find out where they are going, what seed they're going to be, and what the matchup looks like as they try and cut down the nets. But I'm curious, who's the team to you, or a couple of teams to you, that everyone is getting really excited about come tourney time, starting out, Tuesday, Wednesday, first four, wait till Thursday, whatever it is, that maybe we should be fading, that maybe we shouldn't be given as much attention to as we have been along the way?
I'm really a believer in teams that don't defend well or play in a high-paced environment. Stakes it. I just don't know how it translates, right? And you saw them get picked off, and I'm going to go right to Alabama. I know what, they got to a Final Four. I think when they look at Sears and Grant Nelson, I think the guy they miss over the years is Cliff Amore. I mean, that's why they wanted the kid, I forget his name, for Miyako with the eligibility, because they need a rim protector, because no offense to Aiden Holloway and LeBaron Philon, they're not strong defenders. So to me, I need teams that are willing to play defense in the half court and be able to rebound. So I look at a team like Alabama, I fade. Guys, I know they've looked good. They've beat Houston. They've beat Arizona. I'm all out on Kansas. They look disengaged. Listen, Houston is Houston, and we'll get to them at some point this hour, because I think they may be where they need to be, at least for their defense. But to score 47 points with that offensive firepower in the Big 12 quarterfinals, or semifinals, that's atrocious. I'm sorry. That is a team not showing up. I'm a huge Nova guy. I love what Kevin Willard has done. But ever since the injury to Matt Hodge, that has been a problem for that team. Matt Hodge is a guy as a stretch forward, stretches the floor, allows Duke Brennan to play inside out, and it's perfect around guys like Lewis and Lindsey and Perkins. So those are some of the teams that I am nervous about, particularly with their matchups. I think that is something that you want to take a look out for. And then, interesting enough, St. John's is going to be an interesting case, because they were a team that we thought were going to run almost to a Final Four, and they got out St. John's by a bigger team in Arkansas. St. John's matchups can be particularly interesting as well, if, Adam, they play a team that's got size and athletic ability to combat someone like a Zuby Ejiofor inside.
The Bama one is interesting because we are talking about the team that has the third best offensive rating, according to Ken Pom, in the entire country right now. But defensively, barely cracking the top 70. Obviously, a lot of the time, and you'll see it, these stats tend to come out once we get to Wednesday, Thursday, after Selection Sunday into the tournament. You'll see all the different patterns and trends in terms of national champs, and how with Ken Pom you need to finish, whatever it is, top 20 offense, top 30 defense. These teams have to hit these barometers in order to win national championships. So Alabama, despite its offensive flair, does not apply, is not applicable. Neither is Kansas, a team that you mentioned that I wanted to go to next. So I'm glad you brought up the Jayhawks. This team is sitting 21st in the country overall in Ken Pom. Alabama is at 17, by the way. But Kansas has a top 10 defense, however, barely top 60 in terms of the offense. You use the word disengaged. I think that's exactly the word for it. Despite this team sitting at 23-10, what we have seen so far throughout the year, and last night's case study against Houston being the most recent, this team, just despite the raw talent, Darren Peterson is going to be a top 3, if not number 1 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. He is an elite talent, but people have been questioning him along the way for his give-up leap meter, and basically what's going on between the connection among he and Bill Self and those teammates, and why isn't it there? Why isn't this working at the level that everyone expected it would going into the season? I don't know. It makes me, you alluded to this earlier, it makes me a little bit nervous about what's to come still for Bill Self, a legendary coach at Kansas, and just in general, why he can't get the most out of this team.
Listen, I don't think people understand the importance of chemistry. I don't think you just throw a bunch of mercenaries together and think it's just going to play out and win. If you do that, good for you. St. John's is a team that they did that again this year. It's taken a while for them to get going. Kentucky spent almost $23 million on their roster. That team hasn't looked right more than a week at a time, because you don't know. Kentucky could be a team that could win a Final Four one week and can't make the NIT the next week. So I think that's the thing, and I think that's the problem that you have now with college basketball is for these old guard guys. Do you want to continue to do this? Like, people want to talk about Tom Izzo and his old school philosophy. Tom Izzo spent about $3.5 million in NAL. If you look at what teams have spent in NAL money, you're not going to find Michigan State up there in Power 4 schools, which is shocking because of what the number of money they can have. So you got to be careful. So when you start looking at defensive rating, right? I think Adam is right. Defensive rating is so clutch. So if you pull up the national championship odds, guys, again, really quick for me, because think about this. You go by defensive rating right now in the country. Number 1 is Duke. Number 2 is Michigan. Number 3 is Arizona. Number 4 is Florida. Number 5 is Houston.
Yep.
Where are they ranked right now in the national championship race? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Iowa State is 6. So that's why I said to them, they're a sneaky team. The one that's kind of the one that people would be like, huh? Is Nebraska at 7. That is the interesting thing about it is, and I'm sorry, top 20 is Nebraska, I should say. But their defensive rating is really, really good. Like, I'm sorry, 7th. So for them, that's a team that if you want to say, okay, at 25-1, could that be a team right there that can do it because they have an offensive rating of 55? Do you want to be inside the top 50, but you still got that number 7 in regards to defensive rating? So if there's a traditional non-blue blood, non-power team that you think year in, year out, they're in national championship conversation, Freddie Hoiberg should be there. That's also why, no disrespect to Dusty May, Freddie Hoiberg should be coach of the year nationally.
Coach, according to Ken Palm, there are only 13 teams that currently, and I know what happens today, tomorrow will impact this potentially, but there are only 13 teams that rank in the top 30 in both offensive and defensive rating. I'm going to read them to you. You tell me who you believe in the least, because again, these are metrics by which we look at teams and say, okay, you are in the mix to win the national championship based on historical odds. Many of those are obvious, like the ones that you mentioned at the top of the board. Duke, Michigan, Arizona, Florida, Houston, Iowa State, Illinois, number 1 team offensively in the country in terms of offense, but 27th on defense. Purdue just misses the cut. So then you get to UConn and then Michigan State, barely Gonzaga, 30th in offense. Vanderbilt is in there. We talked about Vandy earlier, as is Virginia, just barely. Then you got to go down a few slots and you get to Louisville at 18. So that is the lowest ranked team here at 18 in the country based on Ken Palm overall ratings, 19 offense, 26 defense. Who's the team that just doesn't belong here in your mind?
It's a great start to me. It's Vanderbilt. I think that their guard play is fantastic, but I just wonder when it gets tough and they got to fight for rebounding. Now, listen, they picked off Tennessee, and we talked yesterday. I thought Tennessee was going to win that because of the experience of Rick Barnes and the toughness, and they got out-toughed. But I can't trust that team. And as much as I love Izzo, I'm going to tell you something really quick about Izzo, folks. When you bet Michigan State, do not fade them the second game in 3 nights. Meaning, if they win first round, don't fade them in the round of 32. Why? Izzo's is best in between one day off. That's where he steals it. So for Michigan State, it's about if they win the first round, don't fade them the second round, they'll find a way to win.
Everybody's going to put Michigan State in the Sweet 16 at the very least. That's just the way it goes come tourney time. It's the Izzo reputation. We're going to do more with this coach, James Young, looking at those prime games later on, the really fun ones on tap. College basketball today here on Sports Grid. Coach and Koff hanging out here with you, looking at some of these games throughout the day. And we got some fun ones, Coach, tonight. Not to skip over some of the chaos that could happen this afternoon. We'll mix some of those in if we have time, obviously. We've only got you for an hour here on the grid. 6 o'clock Eastern, number 5 Houston, number 2 Arizona. Arizona coming in at 31-2 and as a narrow 2.5-point favorite in this one. Low total in the Big 12 tourney final, 137.5. Houston put on a nice show yesterday against Kansas, as we were talking about before. What are your expectations here for this one?
My best bet is coming from this game, so I'll kind of save that for it. Actually, I'll bring it up right now. It's under 138.5. Yeah, you put it in preview, I'll talk about it. Listen, Arizona is a team that is very comfortable being a chameleon, right, Adam? Like, if you want to play fast, play fast. You want to play slow. Tommy Lloyd's team's able to do both. But this is Houston, and there is no team, in my opinion, that does a better job of literally turning a game on its head than them and their defensive effort. And yes, I am ultimately ticked off of what I saw out of yesterday out of Kansas. But holding a team to 47 points or 45 points is holding a team to 45 points. So when you look at this matchup, to me, you know, Delorso, who had 26 points, that is not happening versus Houston. It just doesn't. They guard your yard, they protect the ball, and they have a closer in Kingston Flemings that I think can get the job done. This is going to be an interesting case here because if Houston wins and wins convincingly, could they find themselves jumping UConn, maybe being the top 2 seed? So that's something that's of note. So they're playing for something. I like Houston plus the points, even on the money line. I think they find a way to steal it. I think their defense will travel. Key guy to watch out for, like I always say all year, Joseph Tugler, preseason Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year is so important to them because with him and Chris Sinak, he gets into a lot of foul trouble. If he stays out of foul trouble, he's a huge difference maker. I think he stays out of foul trouble, under 138.5, Houston cover and win outright.
Coach, is this one the best game of the day? I don't know, but it is the one that I am most looking forward to, and that is the Big East tournament final between UConn and St. John's at MSG, no less, where you know both teams are going to be very well represented there at the Garden. Maybe Rick Pitino is even wearing that nice all-white suit. UConn is a 3.5-point favorite. Total is 140.5 in this one. UConn going for win number 30. St. John's sitting at 27-6. Expectations, again, are high for both of these teams. Not necessarily as high as they were last year for the Red Storm, maybe a little bit higher this year for UConn for the first time in a couple of years after winning those back-to-back national championships. I just think, and the spread indicates it, we are going to get ourselves a hell of a game in this one. What do you expect?
Well, I'm all upset because I was supposed to be going to the game tonight. I'm not. So I'll be watching from my couch, which is probably the best seat in the house. Shout out to my guys that are going and the people that wanted me to go with them. But to me, it's going to be a great matchup of two of the arguably premier coaches in college basketball, Rick Pitino and obviously Dan Hurley. Two guys that have immense respect for each other, but two competitors. And I want people, I'm going to say this again, 24-2. That is the record of St. John's at MSG. It's going to be interesting. It was funny. If you watched the game last night between St. John's and Seton Hall, when the UConn fans came in, they started cheering for Seton Hall. So that tells you what kind of atmosphere we're going to have. This is why the Big East and a good friend of mine, one of the Nova guys, they call it adult spring break. Why? There's no better time to be in New York City than now in the Big East tournament. It will be rocking. It will be great. And I'm going to bet this game live because I think this is going to swing a bunch of different ways. But one other thing that I'll leave it to you is this. The last time they played, St. John's didn't score a field goal the final 15 minutes. Rick Pitino will have that team ready to play, but so will Dan Hurley.
You mentioned live betting opportunities. Are you going to arbitrage this thing? You said it's going to swing like crazy both ways. We talk about this all the time. Doesn't matter the sport, the game, you can do it. If you feel like this thing, and obviously it needs to actually happen in order for people to profit, but if you feel like we're going to see, okay, UConn's going to be up 5-6 points, and then at some point St. John's going to take a 10-point lead, on and on. You could just keep going back and forth, investing in money lines at plus money on both. Kick your feet up on the couch, cash, and cruise. Just wait to make money at the end of this thing. Is that the way you're going to approach this?
It's definitely something you need to consider, folks, if you have the time and you're going to have that phone right next to you, which I highly suggest that you do during the game. Because I think if I see something, I think St. John's is going to come out and try and punch first because of what happened last time, leaning on that Garden crowd, which I will say UConn will travel very well down to MSG. It's a short drive down from Hartford, so they'll be in attendance as well. But I would be surprised if St. John's jumps out early. Maybe they take the race to 10, and then you could just start ping-ponging your way back and forth and getting in and out of positions because I don't see a team running away with it. It's too competitive. They're too tough. The teams know each other. Both teams have experience. Both teams have great legendary coaches, and both have coaches that aren't afraid to try something different if it's not working. So to me, get in and out of position. This, no disrespect to Arizona versus Houston, no disrespect to what's going on in the Big 12 or Big 10 or in the SEC or ACC. This, and I mean this, is must-see TV tonight.
You mentioned the ACC. How about Duke as an 8.5-point favorite, number 1 team in the country against Virginia, number 10, talking 31-2 versus 29-4 in this one. 137.5 is the total. Is Duke going to do it again and close out the ACC tourney?
I like Duke to win and cover, and I'm going to give you a reason why. It's because Virginia played Miami yesterday. Obviously, Miami and Jay Lucas was John Charles' assistant. They're very similar in what they do. That gives Duke an advantage of what to prepare for today. For Virginia, give me Duke minus points. I think they win by 12 points or more.
Okay, could be some fun investing in some of those quick bets available to you depending on the book that you do your shopping at. Also, race points to 5, to 10, to 15. Duke gets out to a fast start. You may be able to profit nice and early, well above halftime as well. But we're going to have more here when we come on back on college basketball today. There are a bunch of games that we have not hit. We can see if we can back going into a busy Saturday on the college hardwood. We got you a few more minutes on college basketball today. Thanks to the crew behind the scenes, Steve and Tommy, everybody involved. We appreciate you guys. But, Coach, plenty of games, obviously, today that we didn't have a chance to get to. We won't have time to get to all of them. But as we look at some of the quote-unquote games that don't involve ranked teams, what are the ones that excite you the most? Because we do have, obviously, there are a couple that have some lopsided spreads, but we have plenty in here that have, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5 point spreads that could go either way.
Yeah, to me, I look at a league like the Atlantic 10, and I think that's somewhere to look at because VCU is a team that is squarely on the bubble, what they do in regards to their matchup. So VCU Dayton is going to be really intriguing matchup because you look at the VCU team, it's got a net rating of 28 and a record of, I think, 10-7 in quad 1 and quad 2 and play excellent defense. Shout out to Ryan Odom doing a hell of a job first year. And if you know the name Odom, yes, that's Dave Odom's kid there. Dayton 35 in net rating with a record of, I think, 7-8 and quad 1. That's going to be interesting. And then there's obviously St. Joe's. Steve Donahue done a hell of a job with them. So to me, those are what you're looking at is the A10 because that's a spot where, depending on what VCU does, that could be a bid going to VCU or possibly a steal if people don't have them in. So that is a league to watch, an A10 league that's vastly underrated year in and year out.
This one does have a bigger spread, but the MAC final, I've seen a lot of people across the college basketball betting industry today all over Akron to cover 6.5. The line has moved to 7.5 in this one in Cleveland against Toledo. How do you see the MAC playing out? And I will remind people, Akron 17-1 in conference this year.
Yeah, Akron's been absolutely dominant throughout the entire season. So to me, you're looking at them. Toledo's always been a team that when you get to the tournament time, they've been really, really good. Listen, one bid league. So to me, when you have these games, very rarely do you see teams go and blow teams out, even though if they're dominant, right? AK, because what you get now is you'll get a coach that will burn a timeout quicker. You'll get a coach that will play a guy with 2 fouls in the first half or 3 fouls early in the second half a little bit longer than he normally would. You throw scouting reports out. You shorten the bench rotation. So I'd be leery on laying big points pre-game in matchups like these. These are the games you let them play out, let the team win out in the end, because one bid league, this is literally like, Toledo's national championship game. Same for Akron. They don't win. They don't get in. So that's where you get a lot of these games that should be blowouts really, really tight.
All right, Coach, here's the fun part. As our guy Brady Cannon, who will be on a little bit later with Scott Wetzel, 4 to 8 on In-Game Live, likes to say, it's your get even or get even deeper spots. Late night, depending on how the day goes along the way, obviously. And we have got Hawaii, UC Irvine. This one, a 10 o'clock Eastern tip in the Big West Championship, where Irvine is a 2.5 point favorite for this one in Henderson, Nevada. 138.5 is the total in this contest. How do you expect the Big West to go?
This is like the end of the day, right? Where you can either end on a great note, try and win your money back, or send you deep, deep, deep into the hole. To me, I like UC Irvine. Listen, net rating of 60. They are. This is obviously an automatic bid league. They've been good year for the entire year. Very consistent program over the Big 12. Big West over the length of time. Hawaii, listen, they play well. They're physical, they're defensive. But to me, the interior play of UC Irvine, I think it's Lukton. I think it's pronounced his last name. I probably said it wrong. I like him to kind of dominate inside. I'm going to go ahead and take UC Irvine to get the win in Henderson, Nevada. Also, Henderson, Nevada, secretly far from Hawaii. So I don't know how many of the Rainbow Nation will travel all the way to Nevada.
I'll give you another one out there, this one in Vegas, and it's a midnight Eastern tip. So this one taking you right into Sunday, the WAC tourney final, Cal Baptist and Utah Valley. And this one's basically a pick'em. UVU, 1.5 point favorite, and that same total, 138.
130.5 means the first team is 70 wins. So to me, that's where it gets interesting. To me, you have to look at this game going under. When you get two teams that are close to the vest, they're not going to run away from each other, right? So that's what I'm talking about, the runs, meaning a team jumps out and the other team's got to play catch up. You won't get that in a game like that today. Look at the under in that matchup as two teams really close to the vest fight it out for the WAC championship.
I will be on during Selection Sunday tomorrow with Scott Wetzel. Very much looking forward to that. 4 to 8 is when we've got you Eastern time. Coach, on our way out the door, your favorite bet of the day, what is it?
I'm going Houston, Arizona under 138.5. That may be first to 70 wins. I may be thinking first to 60 wins. This will be a tremendous matchup. Half-court defense at its finest.
Well, I'll be moving from this chair to my couch to watch college basketball all day, joined by my favorite coach next to Joe Mazzulla, James Young. I am Adam Kaufman. Coach, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. College basketball today, Saturdays, a.m. Eastern, here on the Grid.